Improve your running the EDDBUD way. We all want to get a little bit faster, don't we? Get a little bit closer to our goals. But let's face it, only some of the people with the bare minimum of responsibilities are going to do that on a really consistent basis. You've got to have at least a bit of flexibility in your work schedule to try and get all that training in. So what hacks can you do with your running to try and reach those targets and achieve those personal bests? How can you master your mental mindset? Here are my top 5 running hacks. Thanks for tuning in, people. I hope you enjoy my top 5 running hacks today. If any of them have worked for you, then let me know down in the comments. Before we get into my top 5, please help the channel out to continue to grow by hitting that subscribe button and tinkling the bell of notifications. The biggest thing though is if you give this video a thumbs up, like that seems to really help with the algorithm and all that jazz. Dankeschön. Okay, hack number 1. Don't do things you don't normally do. So this is a bit of a common sense one, people, but I see people doing loads of weird stuff before races that they just wouldn't normally do in their sort of everyday lives. Eating weird stuff, carb loading. I see these pictures of people eating ridiculous amounts of food before races. I mean, if you stuff yourself full of food, you're gonna go the wrong way, aren't you, on a half or a full marathon? There's gonna be some stomach issues there. It's just common sense. I've just never understood why people feel the need to do it. Eat and drink appropriately. If you're training to the right level anyway, you're probably going to be finding that you're doing that anyway. Have some slow release energy food like porridge with a bit of honey in it or something in the morning. I'll just keep it simple. I don't think you need to stuff yourself like a turkey. When people do get to the start line, sometimes they can get a little bit carried away. They get swept up in the occasion and they do things that are out of the ordinary. I think most runners who are new or inexperienced might go off a little bit too fast, thinking they're feeling really good. I mean, if you're running a 5k, you're going to be pushing it close to that sort of red part of the meter anyway. It's going to be like close to your maximum effort, but there's max threshold effort and then there's an anaerobic effort which you just can't sustain. So if you hit it too hard when you get towards that final mile, it's going to be painful and it's going to be unpleasant. You're going to start to panic, and that's at the point where things are going to start to fall to bits. I think if you want to understand your full capabilities before you get to the start line, you've got to test yourself. Make sure you do that in your training. Figure out where that sort of red line is, know your best pace, perhaps understand what your sustainable pace is, and then your default if things start to go a bit pear-shaped. With this knowledge in hand and on wrist, you can't go wrong. Tip number 2, prepare, plan and prosper. If you're attending a race perhaps in another town or another city, maybe even another country or planet possibly in the future, do your homework, figure out all of the logistics beforehand. You might have to do that days, weeks or even months before if it's like some big major marathon or something. Now, I once read the famous football referee Pierluigi Collina. He used to go to the same restaurant and eat the same meal whenever he went to a specific city or town. He'd even do it at the same time as well, so he knew that the energy would be there for him. He was kind of taking out all of those attributes and removing the variables that he can't control. He never wavered from his routine, and that helped him reach a really consistent, sustainable level. If you plan where you're going to stay, make sure that there's not some massive trek to get to the start line where you're going to be tired even before you get going. Remove the stress and the unknowns from the beginning of the event. Then you can focus more with your mind on the target you've got set for yourself. There'll just be less processing power with your brain being used up on stuff that just doesn't mean anything. You're unsure that you won't go off too fast. You'll have less negative energy about your body, and you can concentrate on what you're about to do and put your best effort into it, rather than wishing you'd got to the event earlier or perhaps picked some accommodation that was closer or something to the start line. I mean, you leave for work on time, don't you? You know how far it is, if there's any road works that week, how long it takes even like on a bad day. Do the same for your race event. Take some time to identify any key problem areas that you might not be able to get to, perhaps some alternative routes, leaving good time, so you don't have to rush around and you're eliminating variables you can't control. Just leaves you with more energy to actually enjoy the race that you're going to do, rather than worrying about it. Tip number 3. Again, this one's a bit of common sense to me, getting in a decent warm-up before a race. I think you're only going to get close to your potential within something like a 5k or a 10k if you actually do a quite considerable warm-up beforehand. I find even for like a 5k race or a park run or something, you're going to need to get in like a few kilometers there just at easy pace, just to get the body in the right mood. I'd suggest around 10 minutes, maybe up to 15 minutes if you're a more experienced runner. It's got to be talking pace as well. I wouldn't suggest overdoing it or anything like that. Perhaps if you've only run up to like 5 or 6k, obviously don't run like for 2.5-3 kilometers. I don't think that's going to help. Adjust the amount depending on your experience and what you've done so far. Perhaps you can look at your weekly mileage and do like a ratio of that or something. Think about your body a bit like a guitar amp. You know, when I'm on stage, I like to turn on the amp sometime before, let the valves warm up. You can then assure that the amplifier knows when it's time to rock. Your body needs a bit of time as well to understand that it's gonna be expected to perform very soon. You can't just expect it to do that, you know, moments before a hard 5 or 10k. I'd suggest adding in some drills as well, maybe some strides beforehand with some easy effort in between, just to get the heart knowing that it's gonna kick in shortly and there's going to be some harder effort expected of it. You'll then be ready to race when the time comes. Tip 4, don't over race. I see this all the time actually with club runners. They want to attend every single race event in the local area. You're never going to be able to do that. What's the point in doing that? You're not going to be able to run every single race and get your best performance. Training's all about that build-up really. Getting yourself ready, you know, pushing yourself on certain sessions. You can't expect to get the best out of your body every single weekend. It's just not going to happen. I think if you want to be at a top-notch level for a specific event, plan it in advance. That's going to give you some like structure to your training. You're going to have a goal date, something that you're working towards. You can adapt your training then to suit where you need to be. I think racing all the time is just going to end up in one place eventually, and that's injury. If you push yourself too hard for too long, you'll finally capitulate. We've seen that, haven't we, here on YouTube all the time. People not knowing when to cool off and just when to take a break really and enjoy life, rather than sort of pushing themselves to the absolute limit all the time. They're human, they have limitations just like everybody else. Don't be that person, be sensible. Like Spock says, be kind to yourself. I know that at times you're going to be on top form and others not so much, you know, on a daily basis really. And believe you me, that happens more and more often as the years increment. I think choosing a few key events throughout the year gives you a bit of time. You can look forward to them rather than them just becoming another race that you've done. They'll stick in the memory a little bit more. You'll truly appreciate them. The race is almost like a dessert at the end of a really nice meal, an enjoyable part of the process, I suppose. I think be selective rather than always chasing that buzz that you get from the start line. Then the enjoyment will be amplified all the more. Last tip, number 5. So last one up is to vary the routes that you use in your training. I think if you're following a training plan and some of the sessions perhaps repeat week on week, go somewhere else and run them. Some different terrain, some different ground, a bit of different scenery perhaps. It's good for the mind, it's good for the body and the soul. And it's cutting out that repetition as well that's going to make the training just feel a little bit more boring, I suppose. I think it also prepares you for running in a different place, somewhere alien, somewhere that you're not experienced with or comfortable with even. I don't think it'll feel anywhere near as odd then when you actually get to the start line of the race and everything's a little bit different. You don't know the route, you don't know the places and the landmarks. It's just putting yourself out of your comfort zone, and that's a really good thing to do in life anyway. I think that applies to weather too. You might have a specific window of opportunity when you can get out in a day and do your session. Perhaps there's a load of rain and it's windy, it doesn't look very pleasant out there. The conditions and temperatures might be far from ideal. You got to get yourself out there. It's the only way. How can you expect to perform in a race where you can't control the conditions, even if there's like a little light drizzle? You've just got to come to terms with it. You can't control the weather. Just let it go. Demonstrate to yourself mentally that you can get out there and you will get out there. You won't be dictated by the weather. The elements aren't going to change your mindset or your performance. By harnessing this type of attitude, you'll become more consistent in your training. Nothing will stop you getting out there. Obviously, don't go if there's like 70-mile-an-hour gales and stuff and trees are flying around. That's just foolish. But most of the time it's just a bit of rain or something. It shouldn't stop you. You're overcoming the mental barriers there, you're building up the experience, you're galvanizing yourself. Most of the issues I think you encounter during running are mental rather than physical, really. You can improve your sort of physical prowess, your fitness, but a lot of things we're controlled by are mental. They're the ones that stop us. They're the barriers. Don't let those factors control you, people. That's all my running hints for the time being. If any of these have been helpful to you, let me know down in the comments. Quick musical interlude for you. There's a great new album from the band Fruit Bats. I really like these guys. A River Running to Your Heart. Rushing River Valley is one of those sort of poppy, very sprightly kind of numbers. Some really lovely acoustic guitar playing all across this album from Fruit Bats. Some beautiful acoustic sounds, actually. I don't know how they've perhaps mic'd up some of the instruments, but they just sound so woody and so present. Beautiful clarity to things. And there's really nice space to the vocals here too. You can understand all of the words. I really love albums like that. There's a really beautiful space to the album as well. You can feel the space in between the instruments. Certainly one to check out if you want something a little bit more poppy and kind of nimble, I suppose. If you're out there on the long run, I think it'd work well for you. A River Running to Your Heart by Fruit Bats. Thanks for tuning in, people. Hit that subscribe button and click the bell below for notifications. Also give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with your running buddies. My name's EDDBUD, and I'll be seeing you